Welcome again, everybody. This is Westchester Talk Radio. I'm Bob Marone for Westchester Talk Radio, and we're here for Hightower, Westchester. They're in Harrison, New York, Westchester, New York. Westchester Talk Radio was produced by Shark Creative and made possible by Entergy, Indian Point Energy Center. And today we want to focus on housing and real estate markets, as well as the process of buying a home. Despite the volatility in the traditional markets, we are seeing stability and even strength in the housing market. Welcome, please, Richard Flahav. He's from Hightower, Westchester, and Fenton Solis of the Bank of America. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Let's get to cases here. Can you touch on why? Richard, can you touch on why that is?
Sure. Well, Bob, appreciate having us on here. Always a pleasure to see you. As you know, I think one of the brighter spots of kind of the post-COVID breakout, and one of the strengths we've kind of seen, in the economy has been the real estate and property markets, more so on the residential side. And obviously, it's somewhat geographic to a certain extent, and where we live is a unique area, but there's a lot of factors that are contributing to that strength. And being, historically low interest rates, folks really getting up and moving. You're seeing kind of a flight from kind of urban areas, and just inventories, are somewhat low. People are, hesitant, I think, to list their homes. Those who have, maybe they're working from home, and a lot of different factors. But it does remain a bright spot right now in the recovery.
A remarkable bright spot. What about you, Fenton? What do you think? What does the Bank of America think?
At this point, we are seeing unprecedented application volume, both on purchase mortgage applications and refinance applications. We see this is probably going to continue to trend this way over the next 12 to 18 months, particularly if interest rates continue to stay as low as they have been.
Wow, I can't believe that they're at the highest in 3 years. Now, you will recall, Fenton, a few years ago, a lot of people were refinancing as well, and it was after the crisis. There was a lot of backlog at the banks. Are we going to experience that kind of backlog again with mortgage application processing?
Excellent question. We hope not. We'd like to think that the fulfillment capacity, we have ramped up for that. I've been wrong about that in the past, but I think at this point, typical turn times have been excellent. We can close most lenders can close within 30 days if necessary. And that's what I'm seeing at my location. Refinance mortgages are taking 60 to 90 days. Reason being, we're prioritizing the first purchase mortgages first. So we're locking in those borrowers' rates for 90 days and closing them typically somewhere between 65 and 80 days. And it depends on the state that the mortgage is in, as you both may be aware of the New York State mortgage tax. And very often we'll do a CEMA, CEMA, Consolidation, Extension, and Modification. That's to save on the New York State mortgage tax. So that process can be timely.
Understood. Richard, you recently purchased a home. How does all of that translate into your experience? And can you please give us some of the initial pieces you looked into to get things started?
Sure. And I will say it was a relatively unique time to be buying a home, and Fenton can attest to that. He was a great help to us. But I think for us, it's what I think most people go through, right? We started kind of macro and worked our way down. So we essentially decided, to take a trip around kind of the New York, Connecticut areas and say, okay, where, when, and kind of how much can we afford, right? And all that comes down to a variety of factors, be it, the commute times, the schools, and how that translates into price. Starting there was an important part. And then, obviously, then you kind of get the pre-approval and you work on the mortgage side of things, which is kind of the next step there.
Any concern about property taxes, obviously, when you made this search?
Yes, and as you know, in this area, that's that's a valid concern. There's obviously some really great communities around here, some great schools. So kind of weighing those factors definitely plays into the equation.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, and this is for Fenton, obviously the mortgage is a critical part of the process. How does one figure out how much you can afford to spend and what their monthly mortgage payments might be?
Great question, Bob. It's really important for there's a distinction between are you a first-time home buyer or have you owned homes in the past? It can be a totally different set of questions that you'll ask yourself and ask your lenders. In the case of when Richard was looking for his home, he and his wife really did their homework. They got an idea of what the benchmarks of what lending institutions were looking for, such as job stability, credit scores. They had a good idea of how much money they had to work with for both the down payment, closing costs, and reserves of escrows. So doing your homework is paramount. Again, it depends on the sophistication of the prospective purchaser. Many lending institutions like my own will take the time to walk a first-time home buyer through all of these nuances on income to debt ratios, loan to value, credit scores. And most good lending institutions will drive them to tutorials on their website so that they can do their homework well before they start going out with a realtor to shop for a mortgage. And very often when I get a referral, I'll take my time. Not only will I guide them with phone conversations and emails, but I'll drive them to a website where they can actually do some tutorials on first-time home buyers. And then it leads me into, if it's a person who is buying, moving up or moving down, that's a whole nother set of questions in preparation.
Question about moving up. If someone's moving up and they're going to spend a little more on a house, but they have the money from the previous home, whatever profit they may have, can they roll that over without a tax consequence?
I think that's probably a better question for their accountant
I see.
to answer. But typically, as a general rule of thumb, they can. But again, the caveat, they really want to check with their CPA or person who does their taxes to make sure that they can in fact do that.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, someone who's going through financial difficulty now, maybe they had a great credit score, but they were, playing on the margins a little bit, and now they haven't been able to maybe pay their mortgage, but they got a dispensation all the banks are giving them, and then if they have a decent credit record, they're letting them either put them behind at the end of the mortgage or blending it in to the current agreement. Should those people wait?
Excellent. It's referred to as a forbearance agreement or payment deferral. Most large lending institutions are asking those questions of prospective applicants up front. And if in fact they have taken advantage of a forbearance, whether it be on a credit card, auto loan, student loan, and or mortgage, we're not going to take their application at that point in time. It's not until they are completely out of the forbearance agreement or payment deferral will we then accept their application and to move forward. Great question.
Richard Fuhav, what do you think about this aspect for first-time homeowners and those who are going into a larger or smaller home?
Yeah, and Fenton hit a lot on some of those bigger points. I think we've done a bunch of podcasts, right, Bob, on financial planning and having a budget and really preparing for the rainy day. And I think this goes through that same kind of pattern of and process, right? It's building out a budget, understanding what your costs are before and after, right? Because there's a lot that goes into it, once the home is actually purchased. Having that rainy day fund, I think This was something my wife and I went through in talking with ourselves is, how far can we stretch and what are we comfortable with? Because that dryer is going to break the minute we walk into that house. So those are kind of, things we had really discussed. And the interest rate aspect is also, and your credit score, right? I mean, I had an old colleague I spoke with whose credit score wasn't actually all that great, and they weren't able to get as good a rate as we were.
Mm-hmm.
That really adds up over time. And the other piece too, I think, when you're looking at a home is what are your plans from a kind of a duration standpoint, right? How long do you plan on living in that community? Do you plan on being there for 1, 2, 3 years, or do you plan on being there for 10 plus? And that should really weigh into your decision on whether or not you should potentially rent or buy.
Okay, I want to remind folks you're listening to Westchester Talk Radio. This is our Hightower Westchester podcast, broadcast, if you will. They're in Harrison, New York, right here in Westchester County. I'm Bob Marone. Let's move on. And this is also for you, Richard. What are some other factors you need to think about above and beyond your mortgage?
Sure. And I think, this goes to, I'll revert it back to the financial planning, right? I mean, there's the qualitative side and the quantitative side. Building out kind of goals from the qualitative side in the financial plan are really the foundation of what's going to drive it. And it's kind of the same here. When you think about, obviously the property taxes, all these other variables that come into it. But I think one thing we tried to do was, look at the incentive of the seller, right? If you can figure that out, it's a huge bargaining chip that you can have on your side, right? Is it a recent divorce? Is it a new job? Are they listing just because the market's hot, right? And that third one there is something I think we've seen a lot in the last couple of months. So those are factors we looked at. Also, just what size and the age and the condition of the house is right for you. Are you handy? Do you plan on really doing a lot to the home? Are you going to pay up and not have to do a lot for the home? So those are, kind of factors you have to weigh and how that bleeds into kind of the money aspect. But I would say the biggest thing for us was the compromises, right? No home's perfect. And I think when we looked at homes, it was a matter of, okay, well, is this road too busy? Are we too close to the neighbors? Is there a pool? What's the maintenance look like on that? And is it something you really want to do? And, I found that if we were talking about a compromise after looking at a home, almost more than we were the good qualities of that home, it likely wasn't the home for us. And that's something we found out after, viewing several properties.
Richard, are there any hidden expenses that maybe you haven't mentioned yet that people may not think of?
Oh, yes, plenty. Yes. And then we realized that pretty quickly. No, I think it's, and it also goes into the due diligence on the front end, right? I mean, you want to be bargaining whether or not, if there's trees hanging over the home or the driveway's not in good condition, right? These are aspects that you can either address ahead of time and, if not, those are things you're going to have to pay attention to later on. I think the upkeep is the big one, right? Are you going to be doing your leaves? I was out on Saturday and it took me 4 hours. It really comes down to whether or not, you want to be out there schlepping around.
You signed up for this, Richard.
That talk about doing your homework and how much maintenance you're willing to take on. So here at my home, I'm actually speaking to you gentlemen from my home in Martha's Vineyard, and I have several acres, and I bought a tractor to do the mowing. And my maintenance guy told me very clearly how to maintain the maintenance of this tractor, and I wasn't listening. I've spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars fixing my tractor. And it's all a good thing. But to Richard's point, not only do you have a pre-purchase budget, what are we looking at in down payment, closing costs, and escrows, and moving costs, but then you have a post-closing budget that Richard was speaking about, and that's we now own the home. What are the what-ifs, such as if the boiler or the roof or other things such as the stove goes or the hot water heater? These are things, particularly if you're not if you're a first-time home buyer and you have no not purchase. These are the things where you really want to have that post-closing budget and reserve account.
Question about that. We often hear that, oh, the boiler's 10 years old, change it before it leaks. That's one of those interesting things. Should we ask when we buy a home, how old is the hot water heater? How old is the boiler for it, et cetera? Those are questions we should ask, I take it.
Absolutely. Very often, like in the case of Richard and his wife, they did, unfortunately, they did a couple of home engineers inspections on a couple of homes they were looking at. And
Yeah.
what that brought to their attention are things that they should certainly address in their negotiations when making an offer, and that could certainly change the price. So doing a home engineer's inspection report is key for any homeowner, even an experienced homeowner who's buying up. It'll tell them about conditions of the roof, of the electrical panel, the plumbing, all different drainage away from the house, things that might be of concern with large trees looming over the house and the storms that we can have in the Northeast, and particularly in Westchester and Fairfield County.
Well said. I worked, as you know, as a newsman through many of these storms, and it's amazing what I've seen happen to some houses. This next question is for both of you. COVID being the topic of many conversations these days, how it has affected the market, and is it still? Fenton, let's start with you. You're on the screen.
Thank you. COVID has definitely changed a lot of the guidelines at my lending institution, and I know a lot of my colleagues at the other are the same, such as depending on, in our geographical area in the Northeast, we've reduced some of the lending by almost 10%, particularly on non-conforming or jumbo mortgages, which is typically over $754,000. Whereas we were willing to lend up to 90% on a purchase, we reduced that to 85% back in March, and that was a COVID-19 restriction. All of the major lenders, the large money center lenders, did the same thing. We almost mirror each other in our guidelines. And then in some instances, there are some smaller banks that have not become as restrictive and may offer products that we were once offering, but they have not. They're a little more lenient. But we are anticipating these guidelines to be dialed back a bit. And it's probably going to be, if you ask me, probably once there's a vaccine. And a lot of people will say, well, how is that all related to real estate and finance? How do you tie together COVID? Well, we're taking a look at the possibility of people losing jobs. That's my dog. I have two labs, one's at the door looking to get in, so I apologize for that. But having said that,
maybe the cost of dog houses, if
she wants to be in the house. I haven't said that. But we do anticipate, once there's some stability in the health markets and there's possibly a vaccine, that these guidelines will go back to the same lending we were doing in the past.
What about you, Richard? What's your reaction to the COVID crisis and its impact on the purchasing of a home as we look forward?
Sure. Well, despite the fact that we were outbid by folks who had never even seen the home in person, that's an interesting side. But we, I think in looking at homes, obviously the whole open house concept, right, where there's people milling about, was kind of pushed to the back burner. It was pretty much appointment only for the most part, and you were dressed to the nines, and the PPE, and whether it was masks and gloves and all these different type of things, which is important. And I think the interesting part that I saw, and I might have mentioned this even on our last podcast, Bob, was with this whole working from home aspect, right? You're seeing folks stretching out to areas within, whether it's instead of 30 minutes out from their work, it's 45, it's an hour, right? Getting a little bit away further from the commuting lines, right? That were some of the more highly desired areas, knowing that for the foreseeable future, maybe indefinitely, they'll be sitting in one of their, rooms on our laptops. So I think, it got competitive. It got competitive fast and in a very unique way that I don't think we've really ever seen before.
No, I don't think we have. I'd like to remind folks you're listening to Westchester Talk Radio. We're talking with Richard Flahave of Hightower Westchester and Fenton Solis of the Bank of America. We're talking about buying a home. And of course, what makes Mr. Flahave an interesting candidate for conversation today is he not only is a financial professional with Hightower, he just purchased a home. So we're getting some first person reactions. Fenton, getting back to the numbers for a second, how have the low rates affected the market?
Well, the sheer volume of purchase money applications and refinance applications up dramatically. And hopefully that'll continue. A lot of the big money center banks like my institution, we have not adjusted our rates quite as fast as we had in previous quarters. And to your point earlier in this conversation, you mentioned about fulfillment and the backlog of applications. And that's one way that we kind of monitor the flow, the paper flow from application to approval to closing. But we're certainly seeing, I think it really, in the market right now, it's lack of inventory. It's most homes in the Westchester and Fairfield County are going at asking or above asking and multiple offers, highest and best offers. We're seeing a lot of our pre-approved clients get outbid. More so, it's the first-time home buyers who think they can come in if the asking price is $600, they're coming in at $525, and that house is ultimately going for $635. And interesting enough, these homes have been appraising. In years past, when a home would sell over its asking price, you would be concerned, is it even going to appraise? Well, the values have been sustained, and we actually have not seen any issues with appraisals, and that's good for buyers and sellers.
It sure is. How about refinancing, that aspect of this dynamic?
So, great question again. Refinancing, COVID has affected refinancing. There are some restrictions. We will only will refinance any loan, but if the consumer has a need for a cash out refinance, we'll only do that if they happen to have their mortgage with us at the present time. And it's not just my institution, other institutions are following that same format. So when you say how has COVID affected a refinance, there's a perfect case of a restriction. Regular refinance is fine, but as soon as you want to pull out a cash out refinance, then it becomes, there are restrictions put in place.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our segment, and I'd like you to put a lot of thought into this. You've raised a lot of great points, both of you, and we have people's attention, I'm sure. Any final comments, advice you can give to folks, or perhaps advice on where to go for additional advice? And as we wrap it up, Fenton, we'll start with you, sir.
Do your homework. There are a lot of great lending institutions. When you're getting a quote, particularly in a purchase transaction, a good lending institution is going to give you the quote of closing costs in writing. So ask so that you can do a red apple to red apple comparison with one lending institution and its interest rate and annual percentage rate. Having that loan cost illustration in your hands sent to you via email is key. First-time home buyers, do your homework, understand what the criteria is to getting approved and what we bankers are looking for. Job stability, credit scores, loan to value. Just do your homework. There are plenty of great lending institutions and lending officers who will help answer those questions for you.
Richard?
Yeah, and I would reiterate what Fenton said. I think one of the biggest things that was beneficial for us being first-time home buyers was having kind of the right people in your corner. Fenton being one of those, and several others that really helped us, just guide us through the process. Whether it's friends, family, and whoever you can consult, trusted advisors, people I think getting second opinions, right? I mean, you might go out with a realtor who you're iffy about. Go out with another one, view a couple homes with several people, talk to people who've had good experiences, and get comfortable with it, because it's extremely stressful. Things move really fast, but I think at the end of the day, you have to try to have fun with it. It's the biggest purchase you've likely made up until that point in your life, and it can be overwhelming, but try to make it an exciting time, because it's a huge, exciting step in your life.
Before we go, I thought of an item. Any advice that you can give to our viewers and listeners about dealing with real estate agents and how to pursue that?
And I'll jump in here. I think, like I said before, do your homework, make sure you know who you're getting involved with. I think, having referrals is always a little bit of a softer approach, as opposed to kind of cold calling the big folks in town. I know for us, I'm very much a feel guy, and the way I interact with somebody and them understanding myself and my wife, as well as us understanding them, is critical. There's sharks in every business, as we all know. So being selective and making sure your interests are aligned with that individual, I think, are the most important thing. Not necessarily, this person's the top individual in this county, right? We got to go with them. Everyone's different. Everyone has different styles. So I think making sure you match that up is critical.
Fenton?
I would tag along. You want to find a realtor who is listening to what your needs are, listening to the desires and what it is going to, whether it be school districts and communities, price point. But you also, while you want them to listen to you, you also want to heed their advice in what can be a very, very competitive market right now. And that's where some of the stronger real estate brokers in the region, who by number of units that they're selling those units because they're doing their homework. They're selling those units because they're listening to their prospective listing, the homeowners who are listing, they're listening to people who are looking to buy. Listening is key. And to Richard's point, it's got to feel right. They have to speak to you in a manner, whether it be your lending officer or your real estate broker, that makes you feel that they're giving you the best advice. They're the expert that you're counting on, and they make you feel comfortable.
Well, I can't thank both of you enough. Folks, you've been listening to the podcast, if you will, of Hightower Westchester in Harrison, New York, right here in Westchester, of course. And we're Westchester Talk Radio. I'm Bob Marone. We're produced by Shark Creative and made possible by Entergy, Indian Point Energy Center. And let me thank once again Richard Flahab. He's a financial professional at Hightower. He also just purchased a home. And Fenton Solis of the Bank of America. Gentlemen, I cannot thank you enough. Great job today. Have a great day.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Richard.
Yep, appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
Hightower Westchester is a group of investment professionals registered with Hightower Securities LLC, member FINRA and SIPC, and with Hightower Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor with the SEC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities LLC. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors LLC. This is not an offer to buy or sell securities. No investment process is free of risk, and there is no guarantee that the investment process or the investment opportunities referenced herein will be profitable. Past performance is not indicative of current or future performance and is not a guarantee. The investment opportunities referenced herein may not be suitable for all investors. All data and information referenced herein are from sources believed to be reliable. Any opinions, news, research, analyses, prices, or other information contained in this research is provided as a general market commentary. It does not constitute investment advice. Hightower Westchester and Hightower shall not in any way be liable for claims and make no expressed or implied representations or warranties as to the accuracy or completeness of the data and other information, or for statements or errors contained in or omissions from the obtained data and information referenced herein. The data and information are provided as of the date referenced. Such data and information are subject to change without notice. This podcast was created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed are solely those of Hightower Westchester and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors LLC or any of its affiliates. Hightower Advisors do not provide tax or legal advice. This material was not intended or written to be used or presented to any entity as tax advice or tax information. Tax laws vary based on the client's individual circumstances and can change at any time without notice. Clients are urged to consult their tax or legal advisor before establishing a retirement plan.